I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
People with special needs have a home and hope in Brooklyn. We'll bring you part 2 of the story of a remarkable young man with wisdom beyond his years.
Jimmy Carter calls him and talks peace with him for 15 minutes. Oprah Winfrey calls and says, "Would you like to be on my show?"
And it's not in the Da Vinci Code. A special forum looks into the real mystery of the Vatican. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. More than 54 million people in the U.S. have some form of disability. It's almost a fifth of the total U.S. population, something you might not think about. And many of them need help with everyday activities. A group of nuns here in Brooklyn is making a difference, though, giving disabled people hope and a home.
It is called the Mercy Home, run by the Sisters of Mercy. And it's not only providing a place for those with disabilities to live, it's also helping them to live full lives. We recently paid the home a visit.
Mercy Home started with the Sisters of Mercy when they came over here to Brooklyn. At that point in time, the sisters were here to work with women. The sisters were open to whatever the needs were of the people, and we began the orphanage because 5 individuals, 5 young boys, were burnt out of a building, and then they came looking for shelter. And then that's when we started to take in the children here as well. And it grew to, I guess in the late 1800s, I was reading something recently, that there were about 70 children in this orphanage. Right now, the mission of Mercy Home is to work with persons who are developmentally disabled and to provide them with as normal a life as possible so that they can grow to their potential and to have a quality of life, you know, the same as any other person would have.
Whatever the limitation, you know, whatever the visible, physical, mental limitation that that person has, to encourage every individual to develop and refine the strengths, not to focus on the weaknesses.
That's our main goal, and I think we do it with love. And they feel it, the people that we serve.
The love that began with sisters running Mercy Home for, you know, over, I guess, more than 100 years when we had a lot of sisters. The love that is communicated to the staff and those who work for Mercy Home. It is just a great thing.
This is the living room at the Joseph residence.
Mercy Home is as wonderful an agency as it is because of all the staff that we have. They're giving people, they have families of their own, but they come and they work 7, 8 hours, some of them 12 hours a day.
I wish everybody in the world could see what goes on at Mercy Home. Now, I've seen that in bits and pieces. An elderly gentleman, Harry Wattell's father, wanted to thank Mercy Home for the kindness and the love and the security that they provided for his son, who was not a child. Mercy Home doesn't have children. And I thought, oh, this is so typical of the love.
It definitely has changed my life. I guess I'm in awe of what they are willing to do and to try, and that sometimes I would throw up my hands and say I can't. And I see them struggle through something, and it's just amazing to see.
I mean, if we could do that ourselves, you know, we would be better people if we focus more on our own abilities rather than disabilities. And the residents, some of whom came to us when they were 4 and 5 years old, and some who came to us a few months ago, are surrounded by beauty. They're in a very safe place. The environment is life-affirming. I would hope that they enjoy a sense of wonder at what can happen when these qualities are in place.
The Mercy Home, run by the Sisters of Mercy. And you may recognize one of the sisters. It is Sister Camille D'Arienzo. She was previously featured on Currents. Sister Camille started an interfaith service right here in Brooklyn for families of murder victims.
Great work there, and obviously doing something great here as well. And the thing that I like about that is that one of the folks there in the piece was saying, you know, a lot of times when we're working with folks who are developmentally disabled, we tell them, you know, focus on your abilities and not your disabilities. But how much better off would we all be if we all could live that way on a day-to-day basis and remember that?
Espouse that philosophy and really sort of take that to heart and celebrate your strengths and really not just your weaknesses and focus on those. Yeah.
Definitely something they're doing there too.
Absolutely. Looks like a nice place.
Right. Well, stay tuned. Much more currents coming up straight ahead. Yesterday's election results could impact everything from abortion to same-sex marriage.
We'll tell you why and bring you the rest of the day's headlines when Currents returns.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up a little bit later, the real-life mystery of the Vatican. A forum tries to do some unraveling.
But first, let's have a look at all the day's headlines. Well, the voters have spoken. The results are in after Election Day yesterday. It was a grand night for the Grand Old Party in New Jersey and Virginia. Across the Hudson, Republican challenger Chris Christie defeated incumbent New Jersey Governor Jon Corzine. Christie had the backing of pro-life groups in yesterday's election, although the Christie campaign has said that the governor-elect will not try to shove his pro-life views down anyone's throat. In Virginia, Catholic and conservative Republican Bob McDonnell beat Democratic state lawmaker Cray Deeds for governor. McDonnell, who went to college at Notre Dame, declared victory in a speech last night.
I pledge to you that we will honor the words of George Washington to honor the eternal rules of order and right by protecting life and liberty and property in the pursuit of happiness here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Now, in other election results, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg was re-elected for a third term, although his margin over Democrat Bill Thompson was smaller than many had expected. And in Maine, voters overturned a law allowing same-sex couples to get married. Well, we're getting more details about the case of a nun murdered in New Mexico last weekend. It's a case that has investigators searching for clues, as we hear from Dave Roberts.
Candles are lit to remember the woman parishioners loved and respected so much. A rosary is being said for Sister Marguerite Bartz at this packed Mass Monday evening.
The FBI themselves were just taken aback that this is one of the most gruesome and difficult criminal investigations, one man said, in his 20 years of experience.
According to the FBI, Bartz was killed inside her residence at the St. Berard Mission Church in Navajo, New Mexico, sometime Halloween night. The crime was not reported until Sunday, when members of her parish noticed she missed Mass, which was unusual for her. So another member of the church went to check on her, while Father Schneider stayed on the phone.
And then I heard her calling, Marguerite, Marguerite, Marguerite. And then she said on the phone, there is no answer. And then she said, she's on the floor.
Sister Marguerite is described as someone who is well-liked and well-beloved in the Navajo community, and her guitar playing and teachings at Mass will be missed. And as parishioners pray for healing, they also pray for this crime to be solved.
Dave Roberts there, and the FBI says that Sister Marguerite's car was stolen from the church on the night of the murder.
Well, the Vatican says that it experienced surprise and sorrow after a European court ruled crucifixes in Italy's public schools violate religious freedom. The Vatican spokesman says crucifixes have always been a sign of union and welcome for all humanity. Italy's Minister of Public Education says the government would appeal the decision. Elsewhere at the Vatican, the Pope says the Church needs healthy debate between theologians. In his weekly audience, Benedict says debate must always uphold official Church teachings and must be done in a way that does not confuse the faithful. The Pontiff says that such debate increases the understanding of the faith.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up straight ahead.
Coming up, a message of peace. Part 2 of my interview with the mother of this special messenger.
He was on Oprah, he was friends with these famous people. Maddie was already doing public speaking from the age of 6 on.
Yesterday, you saw part 1 of my interview with Jenny Stepanek. She's the mother of Maddie Stepanek, who died just 2 weeks shy of his 14th birthday in 2004.
Maddie suffered from a rare form of muscular dystrophy. He was in and out of the hospital for most of his life, but that did not stop him from becoming a nationally known poet, philosopher, peacemaker, and best-selling author.
That's right, and his mom, Jenny, who suffers from the adult onset form of the same type of muscular dystrophy as Maddie did, has now written a book about her son's life. It provides insight into Maddie's life as a fun-loving kid and as someone who was wise beyond his years. As we begin part 2 of my interview with Jenny Stepanek, we meet some special guests that traveled here to New York with Jenny. Take a look. Now, Jenny, you've got some guests here with you today, one of which is of the canine variety. Tell me about him.
I have Maddie's service dog, now my service dog, named Micah, 7.5-year-old golden retriever.
Well, he's very well behaved.
Yes,
so
he is.
We appreciate
Most
that.
of the time.
He's a very good dog.
Yes, he's wonderful. I love him.
Now, I said guests plural because you have more people here today, those guests of the human variety. Who have we got over here?
I have a lot of Maddie's and my favorite people, the firefighters, and we have members of the Yonkers and Greenberg Fire Department here with us today, honoring Maddie, celebrating Maddie's message, and cheering me on.
Very good. We're glad to have them as well as you. So how do you get from the young boy, Maddie, who is a sick boy who knows that he is sick and has this disease, to someone who has been on Oprah and has been on Larry King and has made friends with Jimmy Carter and Maya Angelou and others who are very famous big names? How do you go from just being a little boy to being someone who was so widely known?
Actually, what people are going to find out in this book, because people think they know Maddie. He was on Oprah, he was friends with these famous people. Maddie was already doing public speaking from the age of 6 on. So at a local level, he was giving speeches to audiences of thousands of people, lobbying on Capitol Hill for hospice laws to be changed. I mean, he was already doing these incredible things. It was when he was 10 years old and he transitioned from a child with a life-threatening condition and the possibility of dying to the probability of dying. That this is no longer something that might happen. You are going to die, and it's going to be, in the coming months, years if you're lucky. That's when one of the doctors at the hospital said, what are your wishes? What can we do for you? And everything just started congealing. He got his first book published, which was really just a photocopy of a book he had first written at age 5, and it landed on the New York Times bestseller list. Jimmy Carter calls him and talks peace with him for 15 minutes. Oprah Winfrey calls and says, would you like to be on my show? And from there, Maddie had the gift of 3 extra years of life, which they did not expect. That was as he was turning 11. He died as he was turning 14. But when I think of what he did in those 3 years, I'm not only amazed at what he chose to do, that he took those 3 years and spread this message of hope and peace. But this was a young man who knew he was dying. And he could have chosen to take those years and play video games and go out for pizza and simply stay at home. And he chose to spend that time being a messenger, giving to other people. And he received in giving. I mean, it wasn't a martyr aspect. He loved what he did. And I'm so proud of him for that. Now,
that message of hope and peace obviously was something that was very near and dear to Maddie's heart. And I remember reading an excerpt from the book about when the Iraq War started and the effect that had on him. He was in the hospital, if I'm not mistaken. And tell me a little bit about his reaction when he saw the reports of bombs falling in Iraq.
Ironically, President Bush had called Maddie just a few days earlier to say, you are my role model. You teach me peace. I get down on my knees every night and pray for wisdom to find peace. So Maddie had been very optimistic that there would not be a war in Iraq. And then when, within a week or so, you're watching TV in the ICU and you see bombs falling on Iraq, Maddie literally, physically felt the pain of war. His heart rate went way too high, his oxygen levels dropped, his blood pressure went out of whack, his skin color changed, he was in excruciating pain, and he just cried and cried. And after several hours, he just calmed down and he spent time praying. And then Jimmy Carter called him because he found out that Maddie had hit a point where he didn't know, what is my real reason for life? Have I achieved anything? Have I made a difference with hope and peace? And Jimmy Carter wrote him a letter and called him on the phone and said, I need you more now than ever before. I need you to write poetry, to give speeches. You need to help the world be peaceful, because at the time that we think we have no more hope, that's when a messenger is needed most. And that really reinvigorated Maddie. He said, it's time to get back out and finish what I started, and he lived just about another year after that and tied up all of his loose ends.
All right, well, Jenny Stefanik, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Jenny Stefanik, I should say. Thank you so much for being here today on Currents. We really appreciate your time. The book, once again, Messenger, The Legacy of Maddie J.T. Stefanik and Heart Songs. And Jenny, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much.
It's just such a privilege for me to learn more about this remarkable kid. I mean, he was really, he really was, when you say wise beyond his years, he really, I've heard him described as he was someone who had an old soul. You know, I mean, he really was someone who just had this knowledge and this wisdom and this gift that had to have been from up above. Yeah, well, he definitely demonstrated that, and apparently his mom has also made, submissions there, or other people have, for a cause for sainthood for him as well, because of the connections to that. Yeah, she's gathering materials now, I believe, for that, because there have been miracles reported that have been attributed to him by several members of the clergy. So that's something that we might be looking for in the future as well. Yeah, probably the youngest saint, who knows? I know. It just seems as though he had such a gift, and he continues to share his light with the whole world now. That's right. Stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up.
Coming up, Understanding the Vatican. A forum in Rome tries to unlock a mystery.
They were stories that gave a distorted view of what the church's faith was, what the important issues were, and I thought I'm going to try to go a little bit deeper.
The mysteries of the Vatican. Now, you hear that phrase, and the first thing that may come to mind is the Da Vinci Code.
It might, but a journalist at the Holy See is looking into mysteries there that are much different from any fictional conspiracy theory. As we hear from H2O News, the goal is to promote a better understanding of the Church and of its teachings.
On Tuesday, October 27th, Thomas More College hosted a Vatican forum a few steps from St. Peter's at Centro Russia Ecumenica, where Dr. Robert Moynihan, founder and editor of Inside the Vatican magazine, spoke about unraveling the mysteries of the Vatican. Elaborating on why he has worked to spread an understanding of the Vatican, Dr. Moynihan stated,
I thought people were concentrating in their news reports on superficial matters and sometimes emphasizing things that were peripheral. So they were stories that gave a distorted view of what the church's faith was, what the important issues were, and I thought I'm going to try to go a little bit deeper.
Dr. Moynihan did indeed provide information beyond the superficial and peripheral to his listeners, and spoke, among other things, about the history of the Vatican, why it is here in Rome, the congregations and councils that fill its buildings, and the role that art and architecture play in the faith of the Church.
The faith of the Church is incarnated, and it's incarnational. Our whole concept of reality is that we are connected to the ultimate reality of God in a very real way through the incarnation of His Son, who became man. And therefore we have a respect for the natural world, which He entered into and embraced, and we have a love of the things of the senses. We don't have to just eliminate the things that we see and hear and touch. And so as we represent in this world the aspirations and the hopes we have of the sacred and of the divine and the memories of the life of Jesus, and we show pictures of that and sculptures of that and mosaics of that, and we sing about that and we chant about that. It's all a drawing us by means of natural things towards supernatural things.
Lots of mysteries there.
Lots of mysteries at the Vatican. Well, you know, you also often see the beautiful artwork. We've done stories before about the beautiful artwork and statues and things. Of course, the Sistine Chapel, probably the most famous piece of artwork at the Vatican and all that. And there have got to be, you know, through the many halls and crevices at the Vatican, definitely mysteries to be uncovered. So it's nice to look into that.
Yeah, a lot of history there, and I'm sure, like he said, I'd be curious to know, you know, more about the architecture or some of the, you know, rooms and why they're set up a certain way, or, you know, chambers here and there. I think we did a piece a few months ago about some particular walkway that the, you know, Pope goes down or whatever. I mean, those things are kind of cool to find out more about.
I know, just find out. And then even in the piece, I think they said, well, why is the Vatican in Rome, and what do all the buildings mean, and what takes place there, and why do we have all these different buildings? So yeah, I mean,
that guy knows.
Right, that guy's got the answers.
That guy knows, not me.
Right, wish I knew. No. Well, that's it for this edition of Currents. Now, yesterday we took you to a jazz mass.
Yep.
Well, there are also a variety of other masses, like the folk mass and the Latin mass. Whatever happened to just the mass?
We'll find out tomorrow right here on Currents. Until then, remember, you can always check us out online. Just head to currentsny.net. And we're also over on Twitter as well. Find out what we're tweeting about over there at twitter.com/currentsny. We'll be jazzing and folking and all that stuff here for you. But until next time, for all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night. Tweeting and posting.